G'day Art Snackers, my name is James of Burke Creative and welcome to another month of ArtSnacks Box Freestyle, where we take the supplies from the April ArtSnacks Plus box, experiment with them to within an inch of our lives, and then hopefully create a masterpiece for the hashtag ArtSnacks Challenge. Today's fun fact, and we've gone through so many, I almost think there's nothing interesting left to say about me. My fun fact is I've owned 3 Cabbage Patch dolls over my lifetime: Miss Yuck, Hamburger, and Delphi. There you go. Do you have Cabbage Patch Kids? I loved them when I was growing up, and I think I took Delphi with me until I was like 22, 23, maybe 27, I don't know. I love them. Anyway, let's get into today's box and see what we have to play with. Here is the ArtSnacks Plus box for April 2022. Here's everything inside. Let's unwrap that green burrito, take a closer look at what we'll be playing with today. First up in the Plus box, we have the Art Alternative Studio wood panel, size 10 by 10 inches. In the Plus box, we also have a black set of 6 Uni-Pin fine liners. We also have a Princeton Snap Series 9650 golden synthetic brush in the filbert style. I had a size 8, as well as a Zebra M301 mechanical pencil, size 0.5 millimeters, and 2 Holbein acrylic gouache tubes. I had the colors Ultramarine Deep 092 and Shell Pink 011. We have our sticker and our little snack. Let's set everything up to experiment. Each month with Box Freestyle, I like to take the supplies and experiment with them. Typically we would have a notepad or like a sketchbook or something with multiple pages. With this wood panel, I didn't have anything I could test it all on, so I decided to flip it over to the back and test it on the back, just because I thought, well, it's the same wood, hopefully it would just work the same way. I did realize though that the back of the wood, the finish is a little different to the front of the wood, so then I ended up taking some of my experimentation onto those little side panels, like the edge, I guess, the frame on the back, and that was just to make sure that some of those applications would work. I wanted to test them on the finished surface rather than that back surface. I'm not quite sure how it's different. I mean, it's the same wood, obviously. Maybe the sanding or the finish is different. I'm not quite sure. But I did end up experimenting on the back, so all of my experimentations are just hiding behind the finished piece. I used those acrylic gouache tubes to, basically function as an acrylic paint. They're just like really heavily pigmented acrylic paints. You can water them down and shear them out, or you can also keep them kind of liquid and very full coverage. Unlike when you water down acrylic paints and they tend to just get really sheer right away, the acrylic gouache tends to just pack more of a pigment punch, I guess I would say. I had 2 really interesting colors as well, the Shell Pink and the Ultramarine Deep. I thought they looked really beautiful together just as is, and then when you mix them together you get some really nice violet tones, which was also really enjoyable. I used a lot of water in my mix just to see if it behaved like watercolor. It does do a little bit of spreading, more so on the back of the wood within the frame rather than the finished surface. But then I got to swatching it out and layering it on top of each other, and when I wanted to make just a little gradient blend, I got really carried away and just enjoyed it a lot, just making that gradient. So I did a bit more of experimentation just using the supplies together, but at this point I got really taken with the gradients and what I could do with those. Whilst the gradient was drying, I grabbed my mechanical pencil and did a bit of a sgraffiti technique. Sgraffiti. Now I'm really confused about which word that is. But just basically etching into that paint as it was drying so I could reveal the wooden surface underneath, and it has a really interesting texture. I decided to draw out what I was going to do for my finished piece. I had an idea before I even started about what I would want to commit some serious time to making a finished piece of. You know me, I like to just go with what's on my mind in that moment, but I'm currently doing some lots of Japanese-esque work, and I have a really special place in my heart for a little something that lives in my studio, and so I'll talk more about that in a second. I wanted to do a really small, kind of quick version of it first, because originally I thought, I'm not a really great painter. I don't enjoy having to be neat at painting. I love to paint really loose and expressive and with lots of just intuitive brushwork, let's just call it that. But to be really clean and neat with painting, I find it really intimidating. So I figured that if I could do just a little version of it on the back, it might make me feel more comfortable. But even then, as I was doing it, I thought, oh, I think I'm reaching my limit here. Like this might go downhill really quickly. And since I only had one wooden panel, I was already anticipating getting some sandpaper and starting again, just in case I had ruined it. I'm happy to say that I absolutely love what I came up with, but we'll talk through that journey in a second. This was just one of the other things I was trying, masking it off with some washi tape, the acrylic gouache, and I found out that it's probably better to make sure it's fully dry before you peel it up. I feel like I got a really clean edge when it was dry first. But this is all of my experimentation. We'll take a quick look at that and then we'll get stuck into our final piece for today. Alrighty, let's get started on our final piece for today, and this is my very special wooden kokeshi doll. This was made in Japan. I got this when I was 14 or 15, a long time ago. I mean, not so long ago, just a few years ago. No, it was, I got it when I was a teenager. I specifically remember going into a little tea store called T2. I'm not quite sure if they still exist in Australia, but they just kind of sold loose leaf teas, and they had a tiny selection of kokeshi dolls on a shelf in the back. And I remember going in there all the time and just thinking, I wish I could have that one, like this very specific one. All the other ones, I mean, they were cute, but I just thought this one was the most beautiful. My favorite color is red. I thought that really, that light wood was so pretty. It almost matches the panel today. Maybe that's why I got thinking about it, because it was the same color. I just loved her little like red cherry hair adornment. I thought her face was super cute. I've always loved it. It's come with me everywhere. I travel with it and I put it in my room wherever I go. And now it sits in my studio and it just takes pride of place on my shelf. But my gran purchased it for me, so it obviously has a very sentimental attachment, and I wanted to paint it today because I rarely paint anything from start to finish in a really neat, structured, clean way. And I figured that if I was going to spend the time and energy to being a good painter today, then I would dedicate it to something that had a really special kind of sentimental feeling attached to it. I always find that if you're going to work with some kind of sentiment, that you're a little bit more motivated, a little bit more encouraged to spend more time on it and more care and concern with it. Not that I don't feel that way with other types of art that I do, but I'll just be honest, a lot of the art I do I consider lowbrow, and not in a bad way, but it's definitely not, you know, the inner workings of my soul I'm pouring out onto the page every single time. Sometimes I'm just drawing cute things because I like cute things. Sometimes I'm just, you know, playing with paints because I love the way that the paints feel. But yeah, it is usually really loose and sketchy and intuitive and quick. I don't ever really spend, you know, an intense amount of time planning things out or committing to a final result that would show, you know, a ton of skill, like blending. It's just not something that I find myself doing, and this was a huge challenge. I tried to speed up this footage so you could see just how many times I went over everything. The size brush I had was an 8, so it was a bit of a tall order to try and get across that. I mean, once I taped it off, it was probably about 8 inches of wood either side. It was a lot to try and cover that surface area and keep the blend smooth. You can see it all nice and dry there. But I masked off the area of the kokeshi doll that I wanted to have the natural wood show through, because she is made of wood. I feel like, you know, no need to reinvent the wheel there. Just keep what is naturally already done for me on the page. I did kind of, it's still me, I'm going to skip corners. I kind of skipped corners when I was masking, so I had that weird area that was overlapped with paint there, which did cause a problem for me that you'll see now. I had to rectify by putting tons and tons of layers over this gradient. I thought, you know what, since I had so much fun doing the gradient on the back, I would have a lot of fun doing it again. Don't get me wrong, it is satisfying to watch and it is pleasing when it works, but you know, I think with the small brush and all of the pressure I'd put on myself to do a good job, it was really stressful to try and get it looking nice and smooth. But in the end, it did work out. And I tried this reverse kind of gradient effect. I figured that if I had a big background that went from a pink sky to a blue base, that I would make her kind of kimono, blue top and a pink base. And then I could kind of flip the gradients and they would stand out really nicely against each other. And you've got all those beautiful purpley mid-tones right in the middle that I feel like just add their own little bit of extra something special. I have to say it was kind of intimidating. I know I'm harping on about this, but it was scary to do this manually. I think I take for granted that if I was going to do a gradient, I'd probably just get on the computer, get on Procreate, get on Photoshop, and just put it in that way. I think it's been a long time since I've tried to, physically create a really soft, beautifully blended gradient. So I'm gonna pat myself on the back for that one because I was very intimidated by the thought, but I do think they both turned out really pretty. I'm very proud of both of those gradients. And the clean masking, that worked out really well for that kimono, I have to say, better than any of my experimentations. The one little tip I guess I'll give you, and again, remember, I'm not like a huge painter. I love to use watercolors more than anything, but gouache and acrylics and all that kind of stuff just intimidate me a little bit, especially if I'm doing anything really neat and clean. This filbert brush is a really versatile brush if you get used to using it on the side, but for some of those really fine detail areas you see, I just get really finicky with it. I would probably switch out to a round brush if I wasn't doing the ArtSnacks challenge, just to get in those tiny little areas, but it's a pretty versatile brush. I think some people call it a cat's tongue brush. Well, at least that's what I think of it as, but filbert is the correct name. I was going to say, with the paint, I've heard this tip from somewhere, but I don't ever really take it to heart unless I'm doing something like this. If you load up your brush with a lot of paint, sometimes when you go straight onto the surface, it will kind of pull on the edges of the brush. So if you were going to track your brush across the page, you would notice that it'd be really flat where your brush was trailing, but if you had a lot of paint on there, there would be these edges that were kind of, you can see right there, that ridge, that raised edge around the edge of the brush. With acrylic paint or anything that has that body to it, I mean, the gouache acrylics you can water down so they kind of self-level a bit, especially on wood. A lot of it seeps into the wood. But if you're going to work on something and there's a heavy body to your acrylic, those will dry with raised edges. So I always learned that it was kind of better to start in the middle of the block that you wanted to paint and then push the paint towards the edge. So by the time that you were pushing it all the way towards the edge, your paint had kind of leveled out and was really flat. Then you wouldn't get any of those raised ridges once it was dry. I don't typically think they're a problem, but some people think that, they can be a little distracting, or especially if you're going to do a lot of mixed media, sometimes it gets a little irritating to draw over any of those ridges, any of that texture that dries into the page. So just a little tip, I don't always do it. A lot of the tips I give out, I don't always do. It's very much do as I say, not as I do. But that just goes to show that you don't really have to follow all the rules. You can still have a lot of fun, because I certainly do. I used the little fine liners to put in some extra heavy black details that I thought just might pop against all of the soft coloring that was already going on, especially with those big old eyes. I love those. And then use some of the mechanical pencil just to add a beautiful floral detail to her kimono, and also some shading to the hair, just some really fine details. I wanted to keep all the details super fine and really simplistic, just so I could really kind of show off the gradients and how pretty they were. I am a bit of a maximalist, so this was very different for me to have to simplify the whole process and simplify the finished result, but I am very happy with it. I'm so happy with it, I actually signed it this time. I never sign any of my work, but I could absolutely see myself wanting to put this on the wall and tell people about it. I think I was happy with a multitude of things. I have such a sentimental attachment to the little Kokeshi doll that my gran bought me. Japan, I love Japan, I love the Japanese culture, and I'm just proud that I made those gradients work and I had a good time painting. There we go, that's ArtSnacks for April 2022. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you'd like to join ArtSnacks, you can use the code JAMES10 at checkout for 10% off. And don't forget to share your work with us using the hashtag ArtSnacks Challenge in the mixed community and on social media. We love to see it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again next month. Until then, bye.